Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond Defeat. I'm Kez.
I'm Josh.
And in this episode, we're going to take an in-depth look of brand stability aspects, how they are different, which one offers a bit more stability, and just where the stability component is placed in the shoe, whether it's rear, midfoot, or forefoot. There's only a few brands that do the whole thing.
Also with that, with each brand, they tend to do quite a few different stability shoes, so where each one of those fit in regards to each other, and also going across other brands and then seeing how they compare to each other, because there's plenty of different stability shoes out there, so getting the right one can be a little bit tricky.
So what stability shoes are, if you do have a slightly bit more flexible foot, just want something that's got more support on that medial or lateral side, all these will tick the boxes. Some do it a bit differently. These are made for someone with more of a lower to medium height arch and with more of a flexible foot. So if you do have quite a high, strong arch, you shouldn't really be in these at all. They are just made for someone with a bit more of a hypermobile foot, as well as someone that wants a bit more stability over the length of their run. So looking at your Brooks first, this is a brand that's probably got the most amount of shoes in that stability section. So you've got your Ravenna, you've got your Adrenaline, you've got your Transcend, you've got your Beatz, you've got your Aerial, which is your women's version of the Beast, and you've also got your Addiction, probably plus another one chucked in there as well. So they've all got different amounts of stability in them. Brooks have moved on to this guide rails in the last about 12 months, just recently incorporated into the new Beast.
So as the foot rolls too far to the inside, our medial bumper nudges it back to the center. Or if it rolls too far to the lateral side or the outside, it will nudge it back to the center. And therefore, the guide rails are working together with the foot as you go through your stride to keep the knee in its preferred motion.
So it is built up on that lateral side as well as the medial side, slightly bit more on that medial side since they are a stability shoe. This kind of is that happy medium between a neutral shoe as well as a stability shoe. So I wouldn't classify this as a high stability shoe at all, being that Adrenaline. If you do slightly pronate and just want that touch more support on that medial side, the Brooks Adrenaline will work great. It doesn't lock you up too much, just when you do heel strike or midfoot strike, just guide you nicely through the steps. A bit more built up on that lateral side as well, which is quite different for a stability shoe. Just with that DNA loft in that landing zone, that offers a nice kind of guidance throughout that back part of the foot. It's not a highly stable shoe. It is still quite flexible. There's not really a whole much difference between this and the Ghost, apart from you got a slightly bit more of a bucket seat and a slightly bit more support on that medial side.
So with the Brooks Beast 20, this is Brooks' maximum stability shoe. Now, from previous iterations of this shoe, it has definitely lost some of its supportive aspects in the shoe, but with Brooks range, you got your Ravenna down the bottom, the Adrenaline, the Transcend, and then this guy here is up the top. This shoe here is their maximum stability shoe, so it does sit a couple tiers up from the Adrenaline. This is for that bigger bloke, a bloke who needs a ton of support underneath the foot. Now, it has lost some supportive aspects from the previous model, which Kez did cover in another video. With Brooks going to guide rails, it does offer that little bit of stability on both sides of the foot. However, it does lose that really firm feel under the medial side of the foot. So with the Beast, you do have that medial guide rail running all the way from the heel, and it goes a lot further to pretty much the end of your arch, so all the way through your midfoot. So it is a much bigger guide rail, and with that, the cushioning is a lot more firm underneath the foot as well. So overall, the shoe does feel a lot more heavy underfoot, but it is a lot more structured. So it is still a very, very stable shoe, but it does kind of drop down from last season's Beast. The majority of Brooks range do come in multiple different widths as well. So if you're that bloke who does pronate, or woman as well, and you need that maximum support and you have a wider foot, the Beast will work well. Again, you do have a little bit of a guide rail on the lateral side of the foot as well. So if you do have that moment of instability, especially if you're a bigger person coming down on the heel, you do have that nice bucket seat wrapping around that heel area, and that carries throughout the whole shoe. So yeah, that maximum stability shoe.
And the Beast is running on the straight last, whereas the Adrenaline is running on that semi-curved, as well as your Transcend and your Ravenna. There's not a whole lot of flexibility running on that straight last, since there's just a lot more cushioning underneath your foot, and there's a lot less flexibility that comes with that. Yeah, your guide rails Brooks have been using. Your Addiction still uses a dual density posting, so if you did like the Beast 18 and want a similar kind of stability, I'd look at the Addiction 14. It does use that dual density that most brands have been using for the past kind of 10 years, but the guide rails are moving in the right direction. If you do want a high stable shoe, your Brooks range isn't probably for you. It's kind of just that happy medium between that neutral as well as a high stability shoe. Moving on to your Asics range, so these guys have been doing a very similar job when it comes to stability over the last 20 years. They haven't really changed much when it comes to the actual stability aspect in the shoe, apart from just changing the number on the actual model itself. They are using that dynamic Duomax, so it's basically just a dual density EVA. They have positioned it slightly bit differently in a 2000 compared to most of the other stability shoes. It does wrap around a bit more on that lateral side of the foot, so it makes kind of that bucket seat, which most brands are kind of heading towards. Nothing too fancy with your Asics. They do just use that dual density on that medial side. Does wrap around that lateral side, as I just said, and just incorporated with that gel that does nothing but add a bit of weight to the shoe, and yeah, that's about it. And they do use that trussic, so that's kind of a bit more of that medial support. Limitates that a lot of flexibility throughout that midfoot area, so you're not going to be able to flex that midfoot at all. So if you do have quite a hypermobile foot, these do actually work quite well, but there's nothing really to write home about when it comes to the stability system that they do use.
In terms of the stability aspect with the Asics, they've pretty much stayed the same for quite a while, especially in the Kayano. So the stability aspect in this shoe stayed the same since forever. Not forever, but for at least over 10 years. So the Kayano uses that Duomax, again, from that heel all the way through to the midfoot area, as well as that trussic underneath the foot. Difference between this and your 2000 is it just pretty much has a little bit more gel underneath the foot. Your positioning in your Duomax is very similar, probably has a slightly different density. Overall, like, you put it on the foot and the stability aspect feels very similar. It does use an external heel counter though, so with that, the heel counter can be a little bit more durable and can feel a little bit more firm around the back of the foot. So that is one thing they have improved on with the Kayano in comparison to previous iterations, because it just does lock in the foot a little bit more and stays a little bit more durable. Overall, that stability system, it works well. It is a much heavier way of doing it in comparison to, say, Brooks or a few other brands that we'll point out. But it's traditional, it works well for Asics users, and that's why they've kind of stuck with it. Now, if you need a slightly kind of better bang for buck shoe, you got your 1000. I'd say really better bang for buck, but a cheaper shoe.
Cheaper shoe.
Yeah, you got a cheaper shoe. It has a lot less Duomax underneath the medial side of the foot, so this compares quite nicely against the Ravenna. So the 1000 also doesn't use as much of a firm trussic underneath, just has that kind of one piece running throughout, as opposed to your double trussic running underneath. So not as stable, and it definitely is a much more flexible shoe. Again, it's Asics, gonna have a little bit of gel in there, but again, just that little bit of Duomax on the inside. This kind of just gives you that element of stability underneath that heel and slightly in your midfoot area, but honestly, it does still feel quite flexible.
If you're actually wanting a shoe that is very stable, Asics is probably your go-to range. So if you want your shoe to be very locked down throughout the whole gait cycle, your Kayano or your 2000 will definitely do that for you. It's very firm throughout that midfoot area, as I said, but they do have a lot of range. I think you start with your Exalt, go to your 1000, your 2000, your Kayano, plus you've got your Foundation, I think, as well as your 4000, so they've got a lot of stability shoes to choose from. These are just basically your core range, so you've got light stability with your 1000. Your 2000 is quite a decent bang for buck shoe. Does have more of that bucket seat, which most brands are doing, so it does lock in nicely. Then your Kayano is basically your top tier. Yeah,
You do have your Meta Run above that as well, actually.
Yeah. Your Meta Run's
kind of like a better version.
Overrated. It's not better.
Less gel, but somewhat better.
It's just cost more.
But yeah, don't get too caught up with the paying 300, 320 for a stability shoe. Like your 2000 at $200, $220, it works quite well. Kayano at $260 is a great stability shoe, but it is a lot more heavy than a lot of other brands out there. Good thing about Asics, they do come in multiple different widths. Again, your sizing's a bit all over the place, so do make sure you try them on, but they do come in that 2E and 4E width, so if you do have a wider foot, they can accommodate that as well.
Kayano versus your 2000, so this does just use that flight foam running the whole way through with that dual density. With your Kayano, they do use a flight foam propel, so I'd probably say this flight foam is a lot softer underneath the foot. They haven't really dialed in the propel flight foam on that Kayano. It is just a firm, I wouldn't really even say energized feel underneath the foot. It is just quite a firm fit. If you are wanting that slightly pluser shoe, I'd look at the 2000.
So with Mizuno's stability shoes, you got the Inspire
and the Horizon.
The Inspire has stayed the same for quite a while. The stability aspect that Mizuno have used for years, or just their whole marketing, comes around that wave plate. So what they've done in the Inspire, they've pretty much doubled it up. So you've got a lot more kind of plastic running on the inside of the foot as opposed to the lateral side of the foot. What that does, it's a lot more firm on the medial side, therefore when you go to roll in, you don't do it as much. That's pretty much the aspect behind it. Your wave plate and your Asics by Asics are actually somewhat of a similar kind of stability feel on the foot. Quite firm, quite rigid, and it's not too flexible overall. However, I do think Mizuno's stability works a little bit better. Running from that heel all the way through to your midfoot area, it stays quite durable for a long time, and if you are quite unstable on that heel, then it is very structured. It works quite well. Again, doubled up on that medial side of the foot, so instead of kind of having a single wave plate, which a rider uses, this guy here has doubled it up.
From the 3 to the 4, they have changed a lot. We've got a whole nother video about that, but this is just so they've used a cushioned wave stability system. So this supports your rear of the foot, midfoot, as well as your forefoot. It's not really kind of as stable as I'd say the Inspire. The Inspire is only basically your rear and midfoot, but this kind of that more guidance shoe, similar to the Adrenaline or the Transcend, but this does extend the whole way through. So it's basically a more stable version of the Sky. You've got more of a square wave, so that just incorporates that stability system. With the cushioning on the inside, this is slightly a bit more angled on that lateral side, so you get more X-pop on that lateral side compared to the medial side. You got the Euphoric running on the top plus Euphoric X underneath, so they've just incorporated that just to add to the stability, plus the X-pop underneath the midsole as well. So it is a nice plush cushion feel, similar to kind of that bucket seat, but it is slightly higher stack height on that medial side compared to your lateral side as well. So you do tend to pronate. It will just guide you through the step nicely, but it's not as aggressive as some other aspects. I think the Horizon is actually doing it quite well, just incorporating kind of the guide rails aspect the whole way through the shoe.
To give you a bit more perspective on how the Horizon's changed, if you think of the Horizon as like the new one is comparable with the new Beatz. So at its stage, it was a lot more stable. Their previous model was a much more heavy shoe. He used a lot more wave plate running throughout, and this is definitely a better shoe. It's a lot softer, it's a lot lighter. However, with going to those kind of wave foam kind of stability elements as opposed to the wave plate, it does lose a lot more support underneath the foot.
Mizuno actually are doing a decent job when it comes to the stability shoes, and they are actually innovating unlike some other brands. These are kind of your 2 core range by Mizuno. They don't really have a whole lot. There's probably a few others, but yeah, these, your Inspire as well as your Horizon, are their 2 core range when it comes to a running shoe.
So Saucony do a great stability range overall. I've got the Omni ISO 2 in my hands. This is quite comparable with the Beatz. It's that maximum stability shoe. The stability element in this shoe, they use that medial posting, pretty much wrapping from your heel, again, all the way through to your midfoot, but there is a lot there. So if you do have a really flat arch and you're quite flexible underfoot, it is very wide, it's very stable, but it is a very firm medial posting, so you do notice it quite a bit. So keep that in mind if you are looking for a stability shoe. Definitely designed for that bigger person, so it is quite durable, it's very, very stable, and it's not very flexible at all throughout that midfoot area. So if you do need that maximum support in your midfoot and your heel, this shoe does work quite well in that aspect.
Looking at your guide, this is kind of their lighter stability system, so I've only got a slightly bit of that thermoplastic running on that medial side. Nice heel counter, it is an internal heel counter, but yeah, this stability system just kind of a L-bend shape. So the thermoplastic wraps from that medial side down underneath, kind of in between the outsole and the midsole as well. It does just offer that kind of more of that rear foot and only slightly bit of that midfoot area, and there's not a whole lot of stability aspect in the actual forefoot itself. Moved on from the dual density that they did use in the Guide ISO 2 to using that thermoplastic in the Guide 13. And similar to your Hurricane, these are very similar stability systems. Your Hurricane's got a slightly bit more of an extended stability system compared to your Guide. This is your most cushioned, I'd say, stability shoe out of everything we have here today, with that Power M Plus. With the thermoplastic they do use, I wouldn't really classify this as a high stability shoe, or that medium stability, just because there's so much cushioning and the Power M Plus is quite flexible. The forefoot's got no stability aspect in it whatsoever. Nice heel counter, but there's just a lot of cushioning there. But yeah, if you do want that high cushion stability shoe, your Hurricane 22 definitely ticks that box. Instead of using that ISO fit, they have kind of gone with that 3D printing around that mid-foot area, so you still got a nice lockdown. This uses a gusseted tongue, whereas your Guide 13 doesn't.
So stability wise with Saucony, you pretty much have this guy here up the top, then you got your Hurricane below it, your Guide, and then there's a couple other ones underneath that as well.
You got your Liberty as well as your Fast Twitch. Your Liberty's basically not a stability shoe, it's only kind of it's basically a slightly more stable Freedom, whereas your Fast Twitch is slightly bit more of a stable Kinvara. They're kind of in a weird spot. I really think they could easily just delete them out of their range and you'll be happy just having these three to choose from.
If you need that little bit of stability and you want a maximum cushion shoe, look for the Hurricane. If you kind of want a happy medium between something kind of soft and that little bit of stability, go the Hide. Go the Hide.
Keep that in it.
Go the Guide, and then if you need that maximum stability and you don't care too much about how soft it is, look towards the Omni.
Moving on to your New Balance range, they have tried and failed on a few kind of higher tier ones. So they did used to do the 1260, they cancelled that out, tried to do the Rubik's, that fell down like a ton of bricks. The 860 has stuck around, very simplistic stability system, kind of similar to a 2000, or kind of an older version of the 2000. Just got your dual density on that medial side, nothing too flash hot about it. The heel counter isn't as stable as some other shoes, but yeah, nice light stability system. This comes in 3 different widths, so you got a D, 2E as well as a 4E in your men's, than just B and D in your women's, but plus a 2E in your women's. Very simplistic stability system. It's basically only for that rear and midfoot. Heel counter isn't that stable of a heel counter compared to the others, and it is internal. Doesn't have a whole lot of cushioning around it. Simplistic stability system.
If you want that kind of traditional stability shoe and you're not liking how some other brands are kind of changing it up and you just want to stick to what a stability shoe used to be, your 860 is definitely your way to go. It works well, it's been around for ages, bread and butter for that wider foot.
It is slightly wider throughout that midfoot area as well, so if you do actually have that lower arch, if you found some other stability shoes kind of digging up into that arch, this does have that wider platform basically throughout the whole shoe, and if you do have that lower arch, it won't dig in as much, but still offer that nice stability.
Moving on to the Nike Structure 22. So this shoe is Nike's stability shoe. It does use that medial posting, wrapping from the heel again to your midfoot. Definitely not as much medial posting as a lot of other stability shoes we have pointed out, but it makes a good kind of traditional stable shoe. Works quite nicely around the heel, nice firm heel counter. With your fly wires wrapping across your midfoot area, locks you down quite nicely, and just overall it is quite a comfortable shoe. Now, as we have pointed out in other videos, Nike are trying to bring other neutral shoes into their stability range, but they're not technically a stability shoe. So you could technically kind of have your Infinity Run in here, but it's not really stable at all. So I would stick to your Structure. If you are someone who wants to run in Nike but you do have a flexible foot and you do pronate a fair bit, your Structure is definitely your way to go.
Moving on to your Hokas now. This is probably the best stability system on the market, using the J-frame. So what that does, wraps from that rear of the foot on that lateral side all the way around to the forefoot on the medial side. So this does incorporate your rear foot's pronation, your midfoot, as well as your forefoot pronation. Do you find yourself having that hypermobile foot and want something to kind of stabilize you throughout the whole gait cycle, your Arahi 4 definitely does that. You also got your Gaviota, that's kind of more of a glorified walking shoe. So if you're trying to pump out a few Ks in that, it's just a lot of shoe and a lot of stability underneath your foot. Just doesn't really free up the foot too much, kind of similar to the Beast. This kind of sitting in that kind of transcend. So a lot more stability in that Gaviota, but if you want actually a running shoe, I'd definitely look at the Arahi. Nice and lightweight for the amount of stability that comes with it. It does have that slightly bit wider midfoot section there, so if you do have that lower arch, this isn't going to dig in as much onto that medial side. Very good support system. Probably your lightest shoe for the amount of support that it does offer. It does come with that rocker and running on that 5mm drop. Dialed in not quite nicely. I'd probably take a half size down in these compared to all the others on the range, since they do fit quite long. And this does come in a 2E width as well. It's a bit more of a wider fit if you do need that.
Biggest thing with this shoe, it works great for anyone who does have plantar fasciitis. So out of all these shoes, they do work fairly well for someone who does have plantar fasciitis, but if you have been recommended to get a stability shoe because you do have that, your Arahi is definitely your way to go. With that meta rocker in it as well, does relax a lot of the muscles that would normally kind of be stressed out, and does help take a lot of stress off your plantar fascia overall.
So our picks out of the lot of these, I'd go with the Hurricane 22 by Saucony. I'm actually wearing this shoe at the moment. I use it basically day in, day out for work. Super cushion underneath the whole foot and does have a very durable outsole. Plus with the stability system it is using, it's not going to break down over the life of the shoe, so that thermoplastic isn't going to get kind of compressed similar to your dual density one, so the stability is going to stay the same over the life of the shoe. Very plush underneath the foot. Nice durable outsole, but yeah, definitely ticks all those boxes. A lot of cushioning going over the whole foot though, so if you do want a kind of a plush upper as well, this does act quite nicely in that. Not that breathable though, it's kind of got that happy medium stability, not too much.
For my pick of the bunch, I'm going with the Hoka Arahi for, again, this stability aspect is probably your best on the market so far. Wouldn't say it's necessarily the softest or the most comfy shoe out of the whole lot, but as a stability shoe, your stability element, your J-frame wrapping all the way from that lateral side of the foot all the way to your forefoot on your medial side, it is that just all-round great stability package. Your dynamic stability they use isn't pushing the foot too far either way, but it works quite well. Even for a neutral foot to run in this, it does give you that quite nice stability, but if you are someone who pronates a fair bit, it's very stable, it's quite comfortable, and with your meta rocker, it doesn't feel like an over bulky shoe as well, so you still get that nice propulsion forward, and just overall it's a great bang for buck shoe and works great for any kind of injuries, injury prevention. And quick recap on what stability elements each brand use. So the Asics use a Trussic coupled with a Duromax. That's that traditional way of doing your stability elements. Your Brooks have, for the majority of them, have now moved to a guide rail, so that's that little bit of support on the medial side as well as that lateral side, not often pushing the foot too far either way, but does hold you nice and straight when you need it. Your New Balance 860 still uses that traditional medial posting on the inside, that firmer piece under that medial side of the foot so you don't roll in. Same with your structure.
Looking at your Hokas, they use that J-frame, which we've touched on twice. Wraps from that lateral side all the way around to the forefoot on that medial side. Yeah, Mizuno do use two different ones. I wouldn't be surprised if the Inspire cancels this out next season. They do use that thermoplastic on that medial side, so it doesn't compress as much as the dual density does over the life of the shoe. And with your Horizon, they use that wave foam technology, so it stabilizes from that rear foot, midfoot, as well as your forefoot. So they do got two different stability aspects. And with your Sauconys, they have moved from that dual density to a thermoplastic on that medial side, so same as your Inspire. They're just not going to break down over the life of the shoe. Slightly lighter stability aspect compared to some others in your guide. It does have a bit more longer one in the Hurricane. And with the Omni, they're still using that stock standard dual density on that medial side. Some brands have innovated and done it a bit differently, like your Hokas and your Horizon, moving on to that kind of guidance throughout the whole step, which is probably the better way to go about it, since there are a lot of people that do forefoot pronate, and every brand's kind of just targeted the rear of the foot and slightly bit of the midfoot. Forefoot pronation does happen a lot with hypermobile feet. Overall,
Biggest thing's probably making sure you do get the shoe that does fit properly. If you've got a really wide foot, don't try jam your foot into something quite narrow. Same, if you've got a narrow foot, don't go buying this in a fore. If you do that, even though if it's a really stable shoe and your foot's really moving around, it's not going to do its job. So make sure you get fitted up properly, and happy days.
If you got any more questions about what kind of shoe you should be in, let us know in the comments. We'll try and help you out the best as we can. Most brands are doing a half decent job. There are some that do stabilize your foot a lot better than others. That kind of sums up kind of what most brands are doing. You got your kind of your Skechers as well as your Adidas, but they don't really offer too much when it comes to stability systems in their brands. So this is just your core range with your core brands. Any questions, let us know. Hit the subscribe, turn on the bell, all that jargon.
Smash the lot.
Give us one of them.
One of those ones.
One of those ones.
Catch you later.